Hey guys, in this week's episode, the time has finally come. We are going to each review our 10 favorite films from 2019. Get ready. That's all we're doing. Have fun. Yeah.
Join us. I'll take your line.
Thank you.
Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is a man who just learned how to count to 10 for this podcast. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad I bumped it down from top 15 to top 10. Otherwise, it would take a little bit longer for me to prepare.
Yeah, that would have been tough. Also with me is a man who can get to 8. We'll help him get to 10 later on in this episode. Justin, how are you doing today?
Well, he better get to it quick because we're counting backwards.
Oh my gosh. I didn't know. I thought I had the rest of this episode to learn it. Oh, man. Okay. Go on. Go on without me. I need to think.
If this is your first time listening to the show, normally we don't have to count to 10. Normally we start off every episode in a section called News on the March, where we talk about film and TV news, or the movies or TV that we have been watching over the past week. But not this week. We are going to forego News on the March because we are going to be counting down each of our top 10 films of 2019. But guys, before we get into all that positivity, I wanted to ask you guys, what is your most disappointing film of 2019?
Ooh.
So, spoilers right now if you don't want to know what's not on our lists.
That's a damn good question.
Yeah, not even the worst. Not even the worst film. Obviously we can each go to like Netflix and probably find some instant streaming movie that's probably the worst movie of the year, right?
Yeah.
But what is like the most disappointed you have felt from a movie this year?
Whew. Okay, I can go if no one else is ready.
Do it.
Okay, so I have two really strong options.
Uh-oh, I know which one.
And I'm trying to decide quickly between the two, but I think I got to go with the one that, like, by definition, like, most disappointed also needs to be maybe one that I was the most or more excited for.
Okay.
And while I do like the movie, I don't think it's bad. I just want that to be known. I was probably the most disappointed in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I thought that might be coming.
Yeah.
After that build up.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the obvious one. And, and that's like from where I hoped I would be and where I thought I might be to where I ended up on the film is probably like the biggest gap of any other film of the year.
Sure. I can see that. I don't share it. I think I'm probably an apologist for that movie, but I don't care. I think it's fun. But I totally understand that because I'm not without being able to see the flaws in the movie, you know?
Yeah. I like it, but it also has so much to live up to, being the cap of like a 40-year saga of films. Like, it just has so much to live up to. It's, it's going to disappoint.
I still think the movie seems way too rushed. And they really should have had like a 20-minute longer runtime.
I agree.
That ship has sailed. Chris, have you had adequate time?
I have. Although Justin's answer is really good because I think I kind of agree with him. There was one other movie that I just found really frustrating, and that is Danny Boyle's Yesterday. That was earlier on in the year that we watched that, but there was a lot of things that I really wished, a lot of choices that were made that I thought could have been made better, and it was pretty disappointing to me. So yeah, that's my most disappointing film.
Yeah, you know what? I was going to say that one too, so I'm just going to go ahead and still say it. I agree with Chris on Yesterday. That movie was real rough for me. Every cliche in the book was thrown at it, and which is a shame because it's such a unique, cool idea for a movie. So it's like just wasted on this. Like, that was the only bit of imagination in the entire script was the initial hook.
Bummer.
Yeah, and they don't take it further. I think you missed that one, didn't you, Justin? You weren't on that episode?
Yeah, I was off for that one, and it's just one I never caught up to, partially because, you guys' opinion on it was kind of what I worried the film would be based on the trailer. So I haven't made my way around to it, but I'm not sold.
Yeah, you dodged a bullet.
Yeah. All right, cool. So there you go.
All right, so
have a little bit of negativity before we go any further.
for all the positivity. Yeah.
Yes.
So we're not learning how to count to 10. One of the things we do here on the Casual Cinecast is every other week we do a Casually Criterion episode. And what that is we take a movie from the Criterion Collection and then we each choose one and then we put it out to you guys to vote on it and choose one for us out of the 3 to watch and talk about. And we actually just put one out last week, In the Mood for Love, and we also put out a poll. And as far as those results go, Mike, why don't you reveal the results of last week's poll?
Sure. So the theme for this poll were Oscar winners. So it's a timely. Oscars are coming up soon. Criterion Collection has some Oscar winners. You get it.
Does it ever? Yeah.
Yeah. So we each chose an Oscar winner that we wanted to review. So without further ado, Stagecoach is number 1, is the winner at 40.8%. Second was On the Waterfront, which was, I believe, Justin's review. I think Chris chose Stagecoach. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I lost with 22.4% with Spartacus because all the Stanley Kubrick fans let me down.
We should have hashtag Kubert that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it kind of came down to a battle out between Marlon Brando and John Wayne, and those are pretty big compared to Kirk Douglas.
Kirk Douglas. Yeah. But Kirk Douglas is still alive, so technically he could kick their asses.
So where was he? Why wasn't he championing his film?
You let me down,
sure.
Kirk.
John Wayne and Marlon Brando can't do anything. He should have had him easy.
Yeah.
One tweet, he would have won it for him.
Yeah. Thanks for nothing.
Yeah. Well, this was like a really close. Usually there's a film that's like, okay, that's going to win, and it's kind of obvious. This one was really close. I guess this is what we get for choosing like Oscar winners. We end up with, well-known, highly acclaimed movies.
I'm actually kind of bummed because I didn't really I set out the initial tweet with the poll and then I proceeded to not check it for like 2 or 3 days. But the last time I did check it after I tweeted it, Spartacus was like winning by far. And so I was like, I got this one. I'm going to watch Spartacus finally. And then a couple of days later, nope.
And a couple days later, On the Waterfront was really far ahead. And I was even like telling my fiance, because it's one she's wanted to see forever. I was like, guess what? This week we get to watch On the Waterfront.
Yeah, you better start getting ready.
I was like, get ready. You got to be in the mood, because sometimes she, will not be in the mood for like a Criterion film or something, a bit more serious. So I was like,
we got to mark on
brain.
the calendar, be in the mood this day.
I know. We got to start scheduling it. But, now I got to go give her the bad news.
Bummer. I'm sure she'll be heartbroken.
That's really sad.
You got to get in the mood for John Wayne instead.
Oof. We'll see. But if you are listening and you want to vote on our next Casually Criterion episode and help pick what film we're going to review, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. The polls are on Twitter, but we post about them on Facebook and Instagram so that you know when the polls are up. If you want to send us questions or topics about the movies we're discussing each week, you can send those to any of those social media accounts. You can also send them to casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, if you haven't done so already and you like the show, you want to help more people find it, give us a 5-star review on iTunes. It helps more people find the show and makes us feel really good inside when we see those.
Yeah, and as we found out last week, or the week before, I guess, it's directly tied to Chris's self-esteem.
It's true.
And that's very important. We need that high.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You don't want like a sad intro to this episode, do you? That's the key.
Hey guys, and welcome.
Yeah, welcome to the Casual Cinecast.
Like Eeyore.
Yeah. Well, the one other thing that I want to talk about before we get into our feature for this episode was that I guested on another podcast this week.
Cheater.
I know.
Yeah.
I wanted to come clean with you guys right now.
On the air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
that's like bringing us to a restaurant so we can't make a scene when you break up with us.
Exactly. Although I guess you could make a scene and just edit it.
Yeah. I did, by the way, in case anyone's listening.
It got real ugly.
Yeah, we just had a fight for an hour.
Yeah. Well, regretfully, I must tell you that this episode is out there, and I did indeed do it. I can't deny it now. But I guessed it on a podcast, which are good friends of ours. The podcast is called Cinemusts, which I believe all 3 of us have guessed it on before, right?
Yeah.
Indeed.
I did an episode on The Shining.
I did one on Tokyo Story.
Yep.
Spoiler alert, I rated The Shining a cinemust.
Nice. Well, that brings me to a good point. What they do on that show is they watch movies from the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die book. Mostly, I think occasionally they'll break from it, but they stick to that book, and then they review the films and they vote and also put it out to a listener vote whether the movies are cinemusts, cinetrusts, or cinebusts. And you can probably kind of use context clues to figure out what those different votes mean. But this week, he brought me on to talk about one of my favorite films, Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life, which is occasionally I bring it up on the show.
Yeah, Justin loves it so much he rated it Cinelust.
Yeah.
It's the fourth unheard of rating.
You created it for that episode.
I did, and then it's kind of just an hour and a half of like deep breathing and weird noises after that. So you probably can't hear it, but it's very sweaty.
Oh, gross.
But anyways, ever since I guested the first time, I talked about how much I like Tree of Life, and the host of it, who is also named Mike, he does not like The Tree of Life, or it did not based on his first viewing. So we thought it would make a very interesting episode. And almost a year exactly from the time I first guested on it, where I originally talked about Singing in the Rain and The Artist, a year on, we decided it was time to tackle Tree of Life. So go listen to that episode and hear what we have to say about it. You can also put in your vote by following them on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Cinemusts.
Awesome. Okay. So are we done with everything that's not talking about the 10 best movies of the year?
I think all the housekeeping is done. All the chores.
Right.
Yes.
Finally.
Let's do it.
The main event.
Bum, 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 bum. All right, so the way this is going to work, we're each going to list our number 10 movie, then each our number 9 and 8 and so on. But getting us started is going to be Mike.
Why, thank you. Okay. So, starting at number 10. First of all, before we even get started with this list, I just want to say this is a very strong year for movies. It wasn't for many months. I thought it was a weak year. And then in the last 3 or 4 months, all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch. And so I will say that this is the top 10 films of the year, but I have like another 10 films after this that could easily be the top 10 of any other year.
Sure, yeah. It's been exceptionally strong. And I think everything in probably my top like 15 came out like with maybe one or maybe two exceptions came out like after September. It's been nuts.
Yeah. Very eventful the past few months. It's been a lot of fun to try to catch up on all these movies. So at the end of this, we are going to do some honorable mentions. Just, some movies that almost made the cut, but just couldn't quite. Okay, so without further ado, my number 10 film is Pain and Glory. And this is a film by Pedro Almodovar, starring Antonio Banderas. And pretty much anytime Almodovar comes out with a new movie, I'm there for it. I don't keep up with every single one of his movies, but I've seen probably about 6 or 7 of his films, and I've never seen a bad one. And they're all worth watching. They're all so melodramatic and cool, and I think Pain and Glory is among one of the better films of his that I've seen.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And this one was super close to making my top 10. Like, it was very much in the discussion, and in my last moments of whittling it down, didn't quite end up on there, but I really like this movie too. And as you said, Almodovar is, melodramatic, and his like visuals are melodramatic in a sense. They're always like very colorful.
Yeah, very red.
Yeah, lots of really red reds, and I really enjoy that. There's like this movie. It moved me more than I thought it would. It actually made me cry a couple of times, and there's one scene in particular that I think is like, if we were doing like top 10 scenes of 2019, it would definitely be in that list. And I won't say a lot because we're being kind of spoiler free, right? So yeah,
sure.
That's also Antonio Banderas is great in it. He's fantastic.
Yeah. Like with all of Almodovar's movies, you never know where it's going. There's like 3 twists before the end of the movie that you just didn't see coming. And every single character, no matter how small, feels like a fleshed out person.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, that is Pain and Glory, my number 10. I really, really, really like this movie. And makes me want to go back and catch up on all the Almodovar movies that I have missed, because I really do mean it when I say I don't think I've ever seen a bad movie from that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, me neither. I think I've seen less than you, but not many less, maybe like 5.
Yeah. Okay. So, Chris.
Yeah, so for my number 10, I kind of picked this for emotional reasons or personal reasons as well. It's also a great movie, I think, but it spoke to me specifically, I think, that other people won't get that kind of reaction. And that's A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Last year, we had the documentary about Mr. Rogers, and I really enjoyed that. And I was actually a little bit worried about what this movie would do, and I didn't necessarily want to see a biopic about Mr. Rogers. And they really did an interesting thing. They made a movie about Mr. Rogers that wasn't about Mr. Rogers. He wasn't the main character. It was about his way of life or his thinking and how to apply it and how it can help you. And I found this movie really touching, and both for personal reasons, and like it was a movie where I immediately went out and called my parents after I had seen it. And I think the structure of the film is really well done. I also really like Tom Hanks as Mr. Rogers. I don't think he's necessarily doing like an impersonation of Mr. Rogers so much as just kind of being a kind person. And that was what Mr. Rogers was, So I really enjoy this movie. Mike, I think you saw this. Did you see this, Justin?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw this last week, I think, in preparing for this episode. It's not going to make my top 10 or anything, but I agree. This movie's it's delightful. I guess that's the nicest way to put it. It's a feel-good movie. It's like the same feeling you get when you watch Harvey with Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
Oh,
and like after you're done watching Harvey for like a good 3 or 4 hours, you're like, I'm going to be a better man. I think I'm going to be a better person. It's not that hard. I can do it.
We invite people over for dinner all the time. That's what it makes me want to do.
I'm just going to be nice to them. That's all it takes, And then ultimately you can't just change who you are, right? And you can't just, but the movie did something similar to me, which is like, it inspires you to want to do that. And the movie even flat out has a scene, I think, where it says like one character refers to Mr. Rogers as a saint.
Mm-hmm.
And then another character is like, I don't like that word because saint implies that it's not achievable to do what he does. And they basically just proceed to say that, like, yeah, it takes a lot of work to be as good as Mr. Rogers. You have to work at it and you have to just try. But in trying, you become a better man. So anyways, I got choked up a couple times during it. So I completely understand why you would want this movie on your top 10.
Yeah, for sure. I wish that there was some way that we could, like, not a religion per se, but like a philosophy, like apply Mr. Rogers' philosophy, I guess, to life. And I guess that's what the idea of the movie is anyways. But I really loved it. He has some good things to say. And I think in a time like this, it was really pleasant. So
yeah. What are you going to choose to do with the anger that you feel?
The key is I'm always angry. Now I'm mixing up movies.
Yeah. That'd have been an interesting turn. Is if Mr. Rogers was like, that's the trick. I'm always angry. And then like rips his red cardigan off and he's like, and like transforms.
Like John Wick, but Mr. Rogers. I don't know.
All right. Justin, what is your top 10 or your number 10?
My number 10. My number 10 is an interesting movie that ended up on my top 10, especially once I looked up like the history of the movie. But it is The Last Black Man in San Francisco by Joe Talbot.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah.
It's a movie that I hadn't heard too much about, but a friend of the show, Matt Ward, was basically bugging me regularly about seeing it and making sure that I see it particularly right before we did our Best of 2019 So Far episode back in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally broke down and I went and saw it, and I saw it with you, Chris. You were there.
It sure was.
Yeah, I think it's not a perfect movie. I have some issues with it, and I think if those issues hadn't been there, this movie could be significantly higher on my list because I really enjoy so much about it. It's beautiful. It's got a really interesting kind of sweet concept. It also touches on, kind of feeling like you're the last of your kind, or feeling like, the world is passing you by and you don't mesh with it anymore, which is a bit like universal and a concept in a lot of movies that I connect with personally. And it has a couple of really great performances in it. The one thing that I will say is there is a performance by one of the two lead characters, the main one that I'm not that big on, and it's kind of distracting to me. And I wish it was better. and I think the film would be much higher on my list. So yeah.
Clearly it wasn't that bad because it made it to your list at all.
Yeah. It's not that bad. It's just like everything else in the movie is so good that it's not as good. And that kind of makes it stick out to me.
Yeah, I agree. I watched this movie recently on Amazon Prime. I really, really enjoyed it. I think there's a lot to unpack. I think the last hour of this movie is a lot better than the first hour.
Yeah, I agree. It gets better as it goes.
Yeah.
The opening sequence, like if you can, like if you haven't seen the movie, watch like the opening like 5 minutes, and if you're not like kind of captivated by that, I don't know, maybe you won't like the last hour. But that opening 5 minutes is really good.
I agree. So good choice.
Yeah, and I guess if anyone doesn't know what it's about two black guys in San Francisco, and one of them is obsessed with this house that I think to my understanding, he used to live in, but he's been told his whole life that his grandfather built the house like with his bare hands. So he feels like some sort of entitlement to the house and some sort of responsibility for the well-being of the house. But San Francisco being the way it is now, like it basically is only like you could only buy that house or live in it if you are like a millionaire and have like a ton of money. And the whole neighborhood around that house is kind of like moving up and like gentrifying and stuff.
Yeah, it's about gentrification, a lot of it.
So that's in a nutshell what the movie is about. And one of the things I think is really interesting is that, I don't know if you guys know this, but this movie came from a Kickstarter campaign.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They raised like $75,000 on Kickstarter, and I guarantee this movie costs way more than that.
For sure.
It looks like it cost more than that.
But I think they got like some, traction off of Kickstarter, and I believe
outside investors.
Yeah, and got in touch. Who's the guy that directed Moonlight? Barry Jenkins. He got in touch with them and like kind of helped them out and gave them some advice and stuff. And this movie really took off from there. So like you can still go visit the Kickstarter page, and I think it's really cool that a movie from Kickstarter like got the acclaim that this movie did, and that's one of the reasons I was like, I'm going to put it on my top 10. Like there are movies that are like tied with it that I think are just as good that didn't make my list, but I was like, this movie deserves some respect, I think. So
sure.
That's why I beat out some other things for my 10 spot.
It all makes sense. I get it.
Yeah. Cool. So back to Mike, your number 9.
All right. So my number 9 is Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Ooh.
Yeah, this film came to my list pretty late in the game, but I'm glad I finally saw it. I am in love with the look of this movie. The pacing, the performances, they're all on fire, if you will.
Yeah. They're so hot that we might have to take a break and cool off before we talk about this movie some more, because it might be brought up later.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, yeah, so there you go. Number 9, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Apparently expect to hear more. Maybe.
If we can count that low.
Chris, what's your number 9?
My number 9 came out on Christmas this year, so once again, it's a latecomer. It's 1917. This movie is beautiful. I think the cinematography alone warrants it to be on my list because it's an amazing achievement in cinematography and the way it's shot.
And we should probably put
a cap on this one.
Yeah.
All right.
For just a minute.
We will talk about it here in a little bit. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Justin, what's yours?
All right. My number 9 is probably the film that came out the longest ago, and that would be Under the Silver Lake from David Robert Mitchell.
My most anticipated movie from 2017, 2018, and 2019.
Yeah. Yeah, so this movie, I mean, it's amazing looking. It has this very rich, like saturated sort of like old Hollywood feel to like the lighting at times, and like visually it's really interesting in terms of the lighting, but and it's just kind of this big mystery that like super fascinates me. And even though I'm not totally sure it all makes sense and there's probably a lot of flaws in this movie, like it's a movie that I really, really enjoy watching and keeps me entertained from start to finish.
You know, sometimes there's something to be said for those, like, I always referred to them, like, in my own ways, it's like flawed masterpieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's always a movie that for some reason it hits you in such a certain way that makes you feel something and like resonates in your brain. But you can see on the surface that it has a lot of problems. Like, it reminds me of this movie that I saw a long time ago starring Jennifer Jones and I think Gregory Peck. And it's called Duel in the Sun, directed by King Vidor. And that movie is a mess in so many levels, but it's also so cool and so unique and did so much that like it really stood out in my brain as always like one of these movies that, although flawed, offers a lot, like Johnny Guitar or something, you know?
Sure. And that movie, or my best example of that, is a much newer film, but Richard Kelly's Southland Tales. I really like that movie, and
you
it
do
just
like that movie.
It stayed with me, and I didn't stop thinking about it after I watched it, and I've seen it many times since. And this, I think, Under the Silver Lake is probably objectively much better than Southland Tales, as are probably all the movies that you listed, Mike. But
yeah, well, I mean, I saw Southland Tales too. I was also captivated by it, but I also, all these years later, despite all that captivation, I don't know how good it actually is.
I don't know. I just know that I enjoy it.
Yeah, that's fair.
And Under the Silver Lake is a similar way. It's very mysterious, and it's a big giant puzzle. And in the end, not all the puzzle pieces line up to make like a really pretty obvious, clear picture. And maybe they do if you think about it a bunch. But like the runtime on this film is 2 hours and 20 minutes, which I rewatched it this weekend to get ready for this episode to make sure that I still enjoyed the film on a second viewing before I stuck it here, right?
Sure.
And I was a little like, 2 hours and 20 minutes, that's a long time. And this movie just flew by. Like, it was just as entertaining the second time, and I did not feel that runtime at all. So I'm still a big fan of it.
And Andrew Garfield really carries that movie in a way that, as a leading man, I think he's really great. You get another actor in there that's not as good as Andrew Garfield, and it drags, But Andrew Garfield is definitely watchable in this movie and really carries it well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. So that is my number 9. So move on to the 8s with Mike.
All right. So my number 8 is a film that Chris had for his number 9, and it is 1917.
Nice.
Yeah, we recently just put out an episode on this, so I can probably keep this pretty short. But I found this movie to be really rewarding. Mm-hmm. I think since it's a movie with a specific gimmick, that if that gimmick puts you in a grumpy mood, then you will not get very much from this movie. But that said, I do believe that there are some moments of genuine beauty here. Even if, like,
for sure,
you're one of these people that are like, oh, I know it's not really one shot, or I found that shot to be like a video game, or like too cheap, or whatever. I understand those points. I do. But if you can get on board for that, if you find this technique to be effective and an effective way to tell this particular story, then I think there's a lot here to really enjoy. I mean, there are some moments where the cinematography is just incredible.
Yes.
Like, my mouth was hanging open at one point when watching it, and I had to consciously like close it because I was like, wow, I didn't even realize that I was just so in awe of this beautiful scene that I'm looking at right now. Yeah. So it's not perfect. Sure. What movie is, but it's thrilling. Everything is set up properly. It's like, in my opinion, it's a step further than what Christopher Nolan was trying to do in Dunkirk.
Yeah, so. I mean, I think that's fair. I don't know which movie I like better. I'd have to see 1917 again. I have the advantage of having watched Dunkirk twice and really gotten to appreciate some of the nuance in it.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
And that sort of stuff. So, it's yet to be seen which one I think is better. But I think 1917 is a good choice. And if you listen to our episode, I kind of harp on some things about the one-shotness of it. But, that's the thing that kept me from being over the moon about it. I still like it. It's good,
Yeah. Kind of back to what Mike was saying about his mouth hanging open. There's a moment where, like, I laughed with glee. I was like, this is so amazing. Like, I just laughed. And I'm sure everybody thought I was crazy, but I was just like, this is so great. And, I just laughed because how much I was enjoying the cinematography in it. And it's really great.
Cool. A theater going experience, which
for sure,
if you're listening to this, and it should still be in theaters, I imagine. So try to see it there before it leaves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your experience of this at home will be greatly diminished.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Chris, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is a film. Actually, I saw this at the beginning of the year, but I actually don't think it came out till later on in the year, and that's The Art of Self-Defense.
Oh, I just watched this.
Yeah, this movie I found really charming and really watchable, and I really like Jesse Eisenberg in it, and it's just really a tale about toxic masculinity and why it's not good. But I also found it really funny. There's some moments that I still like. The other day we were talking about it, and we brought up certain moments that still made us laugh, and I think that's a sign of a good comedy. But yeah, Jesse Eisenberg, and then who's the other guy that's in it?
I don't know, man. It's your number 8 movie of the year. You should know these things.
Alessandro Nivola, actually, he's also really good in there, playing the
Man, I would
karate
never have gotten
teacher.
that.
Yeah, we never would have guessed that one. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. You guys both saw it. What did you guys think?
Well, I saw it with you in theaters. That was your second time to see it. And yeah, I mean, you were there. I enjoyed it. I laughed. And we talked about it afterwards. Like, I think it's a good movie. I think it's really fun. Mike, you have to remind me, but we were talking about it the other day. I think you had said it was like Napoleon Dynamite meets something else.
Fight Club.
Fight Club,
Yes,
that's right.
A good, that's
nice.
And
that's like the perfect way to describe it. And yeah, I don't know how often I'll rewatch this movie or go back to revisit it, maybe in a while, but that initial viewing, like, I had a good time. I thought it was really fun.
Yeah, and that was all I was going to say, which is just that it's good, and it reminds me of Napoleon Dynamite meets Fight Club, but you brought that up, so.
Sorry, I stepped on your thunder.
Yeah, you stepped on it, but it almost feels like a punch. And that's a joke for people who have seen that movie.
Yes.
Right. Justin, what's your number 8?
All right, so my number 8 is potentially going to be controversial because it maybe is one of the most controversial movies of 2019 if you read Twitter a lot. And my number 8 is, of course, Joker from Todd Phillips. Yeah, I think, I mean, I haven't seen the movie again. Like, I have a lot of these movies I ended up watching twice to judge again, This is one I haven't watched again. So I'm still going off of like that initial high that I was on when I walked out of the theater, that I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was incredible looking. At the time, I was saying that like this is the best cinematography of 2019. I don't know if that's still true because there's a lot of really good looking stuff that we've talked about and are going to talk about. But I think it's really, really well shot, and like the set design and just like the feel of of Gotham at this time is like so grungy and interesting. Of course, Joaquin Phoenix is great. It's derivative of other Martin Scorsese movies, but I don't have a problem with that. Some of my favorite songs of all time are cover songs.
Yeah.
I don't mind a cover song. If you take like an old slow song and give me a fast punk version of it, I can get really down to the punk version of it and find it
I'm down
better.
for Django, and I'm down for Fistful of Dollars.
That's right.
What you're saying.
Yeah, I like Yojimbo, and I like Seven.
Nope.
Oh, that's what you said.
Fistful of Dollars.
Fistful of Dollars, yeah. And
or Seven Samurai and Magnificent Seven, which is, I think, what you were trying to do.
I think that's what I was going for. Or A Bug's Life.
Yeah, or Three Amigos, or Tropic Thunder.
Yes. But yeah, I really like this movie. I think it's one of the best comic movies we've ever gotten, just by being wholly original and unique. And there's a lot of people with problems about it, and most of those I get. A lot of it centers around the movie not having much to say, and that's fine. It's not a lot of comic book movies do have anything to say, and that doesn't stop anybody else from liking them. And I think I like this movie a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say on the derivative part, that only gets called out when you don't like the movie, right? Because you guys are, like you were talking about Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven. Nobody's like, it's just a copy of Seven Samurai. Nobody's upset about that because the movie lives up to the original, or maybe doesn't live up to the original, but it's good on its own, right? Same thing for some of those other ones. But if you don't like the movie, that's when you use it as an example of why the movie's bad, which seems kind of like not the right way to approach it, right?
Yeah, and I think we should speak onto the controversy. I think this movie's good too. It didn't make my top of the year list, but I understand getting an emotional reaction out of it. I'm one of these people that I think I like comic book movies in general more than you do.
Yeah.
But I also, like, even though I like the MCU and the occasional comic book movie from other places, I don't consider them in the same league as, like, I guess what I'm saying is I'm with Martin Scorsese here. Right?
Sure.
Which is that, like, I don't consider comic book movies to be cinema. Like, they're good movies, and I enjoy them for what they are. You know, they're good popcorn entertainment. But I also like other stuff, too. I will say that this comic book movie is gearing closer towards what I enjoy in dramas as well. Not just popcorn entertainment. It's a little bit grittier, a little bit heavier. I understand the backlash, though. But I think part of it stems from the fact that, you know, Scorsese's the producer. He's producing a comic book movie while the same year, you know, bashing comic book movies.
Actually,
you know,
I think
if you're a
he
clickbait.
ended up stepping
If you're
down as the
clickbait.
producer.
He did?
Yeah.
Okay, well, whatever. I mean, the movie proudly tries to emulate Scorsese, right? Like, the movie is very, very clearly trying to remind you of both Taxi Driver and King of Comedy.
Yeah. It's not trying to get away with it.
Yeah, like it's very much Tarantino about it, which is like shamelessly homaging or shamelessly paying homage, I guess.
Yeah.
So anyway, I get it. I think my main concern with this movie at the time was just that it feels like it's trying so hard to not be a comic book movie that it doesn't feel like one to me. So it doesn't feel like this comic book movie that broke conventions and did something new. It feels like a movie that very loosely used a character that already exists in the comic book world and then tried to like it's just, it didn't feel like Joker to me, but it felt like a good entertaining drama movie.
Sure. Which for me is A-okay, you know, like it's not it's tying into Suicide Squad or, you know, the
Totally
Justice League or whatever, right? So
Well, until the second one that they're planning on making.
Yeah, I say that, but that it's not intended as like a bad thing.
yeah, I gotcha. Well, cool. That was my number 8. So moving on to Mike, what's your number 7?
All right, my number 7 is a film that came out, I believe this is the oldest film on my list. And that is Us, Jordan Peele's Us.
Nice.
Nice.
I'm glad this, yeah.
So this movie came out, like I said, pretty early in the year, and I am still thinking about it. This was probably the first movie of the year that gave me, like, that I remember coming out of the theater with, like, an enthusiastic response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's political without being preachy. In fact, if you don't want a political movie, you could watch the whole thing and probably not even put together that it is political.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I think the sheer fact that there is so much to discuss afterwards, but no one's screaming plot holes, I think is nice. You know what I mean? Like, Jordan Peele walks the line of keeping it both interesting and mysterious, but also thought-provoking at the same time. So, yeah, that is Us. That's my number 7. What did you guys think of this movie? I know we did an episode on it earlier this year, so I know you've seen it.
Yeah, I really like this movie. It's in my honorable mentions, is what I would say, and I'm glad that it made it on your list because I really like this movie as well. And I agree with what you said. You know, like, it's political without being preachy, which is very key to me on that stuff. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Even movies that are political that I agree with, if they're too preachy, I don't like them.
For sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
Like Bombshell.
yeah, I haven't seen that yet, but you've said that to us privately, and I'm not surprised.
Some of the worst dialogue it's like, you don't have to, anyway.
Yeah. We'll talk about it another time. But Us, it is also in my honorable mentions. What I will say is that in a weaker year, this would totally be in my top 10 because I'll use the example that Get Out was definitely in my top 10 of the year that it came out. And I think Us is a significantly better movie than Get Out. And it didn't make my top 10. So it's like more just like how strong of a year this is the reason it's not in there. Otherwise, like it's really great. It's the best horror movie of the year, I would say.
Yeah. I almost left it out, but I just had to make myself remember the high I felt leaving the theater like in April or whatever, you know?
And the music is so great.
And some of the scenes I've just never forgotten, and they're still so fun to unpack. And anyway.
Lupita Nyong'o.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lupita. Ugh, she's so good.
Mm-hmm.
So good. And I just one last thing, I really love the way that it is horror, it is scary, it's disturbing, it's political, it's all these things. It's also funny. I love the way that he can blend in humor and it not just feel totally off or like cheesy or whatever. It's really well done.
I agree. So that is Us, my number 7.
All right. So my number 7 is also like a comedy mystery. It's Rian Johnson's follow-up to The Last Jedi, and that is Knives Out. It's got a great cast, just a stacked cast, and I really like how Rian Johnson, and I think this is a thing consistent with him throughout his films, but I like how he kind of takes something and turns it on its head and shows it to you in a new way, and I think he does that really well with Knives Out. In fact, I think it may be my favorite movie of his too, and I've been a big fan of him since way back in Brick. So yeah, I really love this. A great star-turning performance from Ana de Armas, and also there was a worry that Daniel Craig his accent may not be great, or he may not fit that role, but I also think Daniel Craig nails it. Does a really great job in this. It's funny and suspenseful. And it's also, I think it fits in with the Us and this and some other movies that we may talk about later fit in with the general theme of the year, and like class warfare or eat the rich type stuff. But yeah, I really love this. How do you?
Yeah, this was a film that was on my top 10 until I think yesterday. Then Portrait of a Lady on Fire knocked it right out of there. But for the longest time, I wanted to keep it in there just because I wanted a lighthearted, fun romp in my top 10. You know what I mean? This movie is just a blast. So it is definitely going to be on my honorable mentions at the end. I really enjoy it. I agree with you. It is one of Rian Johnson's better films, and Rian Johnson makes good films. So that's just, all the better. What I would say is this movie takes a genre that feels pretty old and quaint and kind of gives it a modern boost while still letting it feel quaint when it needs to. And that's kind of the charm of it. So anyway, a great cast, really wicked smart script, lots of funny dialogue and chemistry between everybody. Rian Johnson can pull out performances and actors that most directors cannot. And for evidence of that, just look at The Last Jedi's acting versus The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker, right? Those same actors that are in those other movies are so much better in Rian Johnson's movie.
Agreed.
But anyway, what do you think, Justin?
Donut holes.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Genius.
Yeah.
I love it.
I still laugh really every time I think of that scene.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like it. It's charming and it's fun, and I always have room for a fun movie in the world, but not in my top 10.
All right,
Justin, what's your number 7?
All right, my number 7 has already been talked about, so without giving it a huge introduction, it is Portrait of a Lady on Fire from Celine Sciamma. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but giving it a go. But yeah, you've talked about it a little bit, Mike. I agree. This movie is so amazingly shot, very minimally shot too, in a way that I really love. I love the look of it. I love the tone of this film, and just the tension in it just kind of kept me on the edge of my seat, the whole time. And I just found it to be, it has this look when I saw the trailer that it was going to be super pretentious. And I'm not going to say that it's not pretentious in some ways, but I don't know. I connected with it a lot more than I thought I would, and without having to think as much as I thought I would. Not to say that there's nothing to think about, but I don't know. It was just a really pretty easy watch. I connected with the characters. I connected with the story. I found, I just found it heartbreaking at times, and yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail because I'll give something away. But yeah, what did you, Chris? Did you see this yet?
I haven't. This is one that I'm probably gonna have to wait till the release date, for everywhere else besides New York and LA, is February 14th. So I'll have to wait till then to see it. But I'm really jealous that you guys did get a chance to see it.
Yeah, Mike, did you want to elaborate?
No, everything you said is 100% correct. I think this movie is really, I don't even know. It's just right. Like, there's no missteps.
Yeah.
Like, there's no decision made where you're like, ugh. You know what I mean? Like you said, it seemed like you can look at this movie and be like, oh, pretentious LBGQ drama, you know?
Yeah.
Like, those are the dime a dozen. They come out like all the time. But for some reason, this movie doesn't feel old or repetitive, or you know what I mean? It just feels like the energy there, like the actors are alive, the shots all pop, you know? It's just, there's nothing that happens that feels wrong.
No, and in a world where people are upset about the Oscars for their best director choices and a lot of other awards for like how, men and particularly white men are, overly celebrated in film, like this is a film you should check out because it's female written and directed. The three main characters are female. There's barely a man anywhere in the movie. There's maybe like 2 to 3 minutes. So there's a person that drops her off in the beginning who's a man, and there's one that comes up later in the movie that visits.
Oh, yeah.
And that's pretty much it. Yeah, probably collectively less than 2 minutes of the runtime of the film have like a man in it. So it's very female driven, very female centric, and really incredible.
Yeah,
it's a discrimination against men.
This is the feeling I wanted to feel like a couple years ago when everyone was loving Call Me by Your Name.
Okay, I can see that in like
this movie
similarity.
Beats the crap out of Call Me by Your Name.
I agree, and I think
and you like that movie a lot more than me.
I do really like Call Me by Your Name, but I do agree that this is a better version of it. I think it feels more
true,
sincere.
To me.
Oh yeah, yes. So it feels more sincere, a little bit less like overly glamorized.
Yeah.
So
thank you for that's a good way to word it.
Good. That's off the top of my head.
Yeah. But anyway, great movie, and I'm glad that it made your list, and I can't wait for Chris to see it.
Yeah, same.
Me either.
Cool. Well, so that's it for Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and number 6 is Mike. Go ahead.
All right. So I have a feeling I'm going to have to not mention a whole lot about this movie. And that movie is Little Women.
Yeah.
This was my first experience with any version of Little Women, and it was wonderful. I enjoyed this movie much more than I thought I would. Greta Gerwig is great. She directed it. I enjoyed this even more than Lady Bird, which I also enjoyed. So am I right in assuming that this is going to be talked about somewhere else?
We'll
Absolutely,
talk about it
you
more
are right.
later.
Okay. So
not to
spoiler that's all alert. I want to say about Little Women right here in the number 6 slot, apparently. Chris, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is a freight train of a movie. This movie starts and it basically just pushes you down a hill and you don't stop until the end. And that's Uncut Gems, starring Adam Sandler from the Safdie brothers. This was probably the most tense film I watched all year. Had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. After I left the theater, I had to, take a few deep breaths because I had been, clenched the whole time. Mm-hmm. I think I love Punch Drunk Love, and maybe this is recency bias, but I think that this is a better performance from Adam Sandler. In Punch Drunk Love, I feel like it still feels like Adam Sandler, but in this one, I feel like he disappears. And at some point, I forget that it's Adam Sandler acting,
Yeah, he disappears. He disappears and then becomes Al Pacino in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think we should probably shelve this conversation until a little later.
I felt like we might have to, but yeah, awesome. All right.
I think we might have to do that increasingly now at the second half of our list.
Our top 5s may be very similar.
It's quite possible, yeah. Especially because there's a lot of movies in mine that none of us have mentioned so far.
Yep, same.
All right. So that brings me to me, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So my number 6 is The Farewell by Lulu Wang. And I don't know if we'll have to talk about this or not, but briefly I'll just say this is a movie I was looking forward to coming out of Sundance. And I think it's a very subdued dramedy. and that I thought was really funny, really heartwarming. I think it's got great performances, a great like ensemble cast. But Awkwafina in general as the lead is really, really good. And it's a very simple, like, can't really get over the moon about like the cinematography or the editing or like anything. It's just like really straightforward script, straightforward like dramedy that I just really spoke to me and really moved me.
I agree.
Agreed. And we will probably talk about this later.
Okay.
Oh, look at you two.
That's what I thought. Cool. All right. So number 5s.
Okay. So
real quick before we do number 5s, I do want to mention that I think we've only had 3 movies out of the bottom 5 that have crossed over. Like out of the 3 of us, we almost have like, I guess that would be 3. So we have like 12 completely different movies. So I think that speaks to how good of a year it was, right?
Oh yeah, cool. Definitely. But I have a feeling that will end soon.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to say it now.
Thank you.
So no matter how the rest of the show goes, remember, we did watch different movies this year.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So my number 5 is a film that is probably the most unique film of the year, and that is The Lighthouse.
Oh.
Yeah. This movie is just this weird, crazy fever dream that just feels like this very singular vision. The performances from Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson are really fun to watch. Both of these guys are just doing their thing, approaching things very differently and coming up with some really interesting energy on screen. The cinematography is really cool and unlike anything in recent memory, that's for sure. And the literary symbolism involved to unpack the film when it's over. Like you can dive into Greek gods and, ancient dialect, or not ancient, like old dialect of the time, you can dive into so much to appreciate in this movie that just doesn't feel like anything else. It feels like this weird sea shanty tale that is timeless and can take place, 50 years ago or 300 years ago, So anyways, I think this movie is just really fascinating and really cool. If you liked The Witch from a couple years back from Robert Eggers, I think that you should check out The Lighthouse.
For sure. This isn't on my list, but it's in my honorable mentions. And one of the things I really love about Robert Eggers is his attention to detail. Like, he does so much research before, like shooting, and just the authentic details that he gets, like the accents that William Dafoe had, that he got from some sort of diary that he found from someone back then. And the attention to detail really sets his movies apart, among other things.
And this was on my honorable mentions too. This didn't quite make my list, but I did really enjoy it. And I remember our conversation about it being really interesting. I think I could pretty confidently say that the reason that this probably doesn't make my list is because I never got a chance to see it again. Mm-hmm. And it's a complex movie with a lot to unpack. And I think...
And you also watched it the same day you watched Marriage Story, right?
Did I? I think
you
Jojo
watched
Rabbit.
3 movies that day, or 2 movies that day.
Jojo Rabbit and this and Marriage Story.
Yeah.
So fair enough that I was trying to unpack 3 movies at once, I guess, and not this one. Which, that's totally a fair point. And I think that once you know what you're in for with this movie, it's probably going to get better on repeat viewings, and you'll be able to appreciate it more, because I spent so much of this movie not knowing what was going to happen and just be like, what's going to come next? Like, and to the point where I couldn't even really think about what had happened.
That makes sense. Because it's just so much tension that has to break somehow. Exactly.
And it's undeniably beautiful. You're right about the cinematography, and not a lot of black and white movies coming out, but it joins several in the last few years that have come out and just like really nailed black and white cinematography and made it look beautiful, and in some ways better than a lot of color cinematography.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, and even the 4:3-ish aspect ratio. I don't even know if it's full 4:3. I think it might be like some kind of in-between aspect ratio, but a lot of films lately have been doing that kind of thing, changing up the widescreen aspect ratio, and I think this movie makes good use of that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Cool. So that is my number 5. Chris, what about your number 5?
My number 5, I feel like we might talk about later, but the first half of this movie is Uncut Gems. You get pushed down a hill, and the second half of this movie is a Terrence Malick film, I think. And And yeah, the movie is Trey Edward Schultz's Waves. The performances in this are really great all around. Everybody has a great performance in this. And it's really fascinating that we get like these two distinct films and that they mesh together so well. He really pulls something off. We talked about it, I think it was last week recently. And I think actually the best way to describe it, I heard someone describe it this way, so I can't take credit for it, but that's why the movie's called Waves, is because it's a wave. Like the first half is the wave crashing in, and the second half is the wave like pulling back slowly. And it really works that way.
Yeah. So at least as far as I'm concerned, this is also my number 5 movie.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Synergy.
Do we need to pause for it to come up later?
No, we don't.
Okay.
It is in my honorable mentions, though, but not on my top 10, so go nuts.
Great. So everything that Chris said, I'll just say ditto to that. Great performances. We talked about this before, but it was a movie I wasn't sure about for the first half of the movie. I didn't dislike it.
Yeah.
But I just wasn't sure what kind of movie I was getting. And it's only with the second half that like things became clear to me and I started to really enjoy the movie and really appreciate the first half. And that's just a fascinating journey to me to go on. And like, I won't forget the way that I felt during that movie, because I don't think I've felt that way about any other movie this year to, not know how I feel about it, but by like the last 30 minutes, just be completely turned around and like loving the movie.
Yeah.
Great performances, really interesting, raw cinematography that I really enjoy. And yeah, this is another one that made me cry. I think a lot of the movies, several of the movies as we go on here, I'm going to be saying that a lot, but this movie made me cry a couple of times, and which is something I always appreciate. And yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah, when I watched this last week or the week before, I had a very similar experience. About halfway through it, I thought to myself, what am I watching? Is this good? I don't know. The second half made me feel better about everything I had seen up to that point and made me realize that what I was watching was quite profound and definitely something that I would not be soon forgetting. In fact, I'll go ahead and say right now that my number 9 through like 15 or 14 on my like honorable mentions all could have been like the last 2 slots. They all could have been number 9 and 10. You know what I mean? Like they're all very interchangeable. And Waves was one of those. The only reason I didn't put it on there, honestly, was because I felt like you guys probably would.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you weren't wrong.
Diversity's sake. I get it.
Yeah. So yeah, wonderful movie. Waves.
All right. So that was Waves, which was both mine and Chris's number 5 film. So now we're on to our number 4 films. Back to you, Mike.
All right. This is a film that was mentioned earlier by Chris, I believe in his number 6 time. I can't remember. But anyways.
I believe so, yeah.
Uncut Gems.
Nice.
Yes. This is the newest film from the Safdie brothers, who did Good Time, starring Adam Sandler. I agree with Chris that this is probably Adam Sandler's best role. I doubt he will ever top this because, goodness, how could you? Like Al Pacino hasn't topped Dog Day Afternoon, in my opinion.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. I've never thought about it, but I agree. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, anyway, that's it, really. I mean, like, what else can you say about this movie that hasn't been said? It's stressful. It's just relentless. It's fascinating to watch. Adam Sandler's on another level. It just goes to show you that with the right filmmakers, casting is everything, you know? It's just all about the chemistry of what works together. You know, Adam Sandler is so good in the right hands, but so terrible not in the right hands. So it's just this really fascinating movie in that sense. And also you have NBA players coming in there actually acting. Yeah. And it's not distracting. It weaves into like real events in real life that I think sometimes could be lame in movies, but feels pretty cool in this movie. I'll keep it vague there. Let me just say that I like this movie a lot. Adam Sandler's best role, super stressful. I don't know what else to say about it, really.
Sure. Yeah, it's not on my list, but it is in my honorable mentions. It's one of the few movies this year and maybe even the last like few years that has really just made me like kind of watch through my fingers almost. Mm-hmm. You know, like head in my hands so much of being like, oh no, come on.
Well, let's put it this way.
Character, don't do that.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. The movie ends a certain way. And then in retrospect, when it's over, you're like, well, it really couldn't have ended any other way.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I don't know why I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
Sure,
I even did see it coming and was relieved when it happened.
Oh, nice. But
Because then I could breathe.
Yeah. But I think this kind of film and the tone and suspense of this film is very clearly like the Safdie brothers' strength, because after seeing this film, I went back and visited for the first time, Good Time with Robert Pattinson.
Oh, yeah. What'd you think?
Oh, I really liked it. I don't know which movie I like better, to be honest. I think Uncut Gems has a charm because it's Adam Sandler doing something really great, whereas Robert Pattinson nowadays generally does really great things. Mm-hmm. So Uncut Gems was a little bit more unique, but both are just like incredible like adventures of just watching someone just go deeper and deeper down a rabbit hole and stressing you out.
Yeah. Anxiety cinema.
Yeah.
It's a new genre.
Cool.
So that's my number 4. Chris, what about you?
All right, my number 4 has already been mentioned, and I think actually this movie is the movie that ushered in like the good cinema, like the good months, like it was kind of the first of the good films that were to come out in the last 3 or 4 months of the year, and that's The Farewell.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah, it has I agree with everything that Justin's already said about it. Are we going to talk about this further later, or should I continue?
Go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, Awkwafina is great in this role. This is probably the most disappointing thing about the Oscars to me. The fact that I don't think it has any recognition at all. And I find this movie just so charming, and also very much like A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, just like a feel-good movie. There's like this moment at the end that gives you this happiness that you get to walk out of the theater and you're like, this worked out really well, and so yeah, I love this film. I love the direction. It looks great, like Justin was saying. Just really, really solid film, and I can't wait to see what we get next from this director.
I agree. Since I haven't talked about this film yet, I'll go ahead and just hop in. I agree with what you guys are saying. This is in my honorable mentions as well. So almost made slot number 9 or 10. But not quite. I think Awkwafina is really great. Like you guys were saying, this is my first experience with Aquafina. Well, that's not true. I saw Crazy Rich Asians. Mm-hmm. And so this is my second experience with Awkwafina.
Did you not see Ocean's 8?
No.
Okay.
It looked bad.
It's not, but it's not good. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I say bad, that's what I mean, really, is it looked like a pretty standard, not good movie.
Yeah. Well, cool. I don't want to take attention away from Farewell, so I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, but I would say Awkwafina is someone that I am interested to see where they go going forward. She seems like she could be like an Adam Sandler type, though, where in the right hands, she's great. She can make you feel. But in the wrong hands, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, she's mostly kind of got the tone and the style for like comedy, but, they say that like, you got to be able to make them laugh to make them cry, and comedy is just as important to drama.
I did both in this movie, so
that's true. It's a movie that makes me sad that I don't speak Mandarin, or I think that's like the main language throughout the film, although there might be some others. But I saw this film in theaters like the day that it came out, because at the time this local art house theater only had like one screening scheduled. So it seemed like everybody was like, I got to go see this movie. And I think for obvious reasons, this movie is very popular in like the Asian community. So the like theater was packed, and there was so much more laughter like than I had. And like at times where I didn't realize a joke was going on because like the subtitles didn't like portray a joke. Yeah. But there was very clearly something like in the language, and like people who spoke the language and didn't need the subtitles were clearly latching on to things that I wasn't.
Right. Yeah, that was my experience when I watched Roma in theaters with the Hispanic audience around me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could totally see that. That makes perfect sense. But yeah, I think there's just a whole layer of the film that I'm missing, and it makes me sad.
Yeah.
Need to get on some Rosetta Stone or something and watch it again.
Yeah. So that was my number 4. Justin, what's your number 4?
All right. My number 4 is similar to a film that I mentioned earlier, in the sense that I did not feel the runtime of this film as much as I thought I was going to. And if you haven't figured out by now, the movie I'm talking about is Martin Scorsese's The Irishman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a long talked about, long awaited film, and there was a lot of questions about how good it was going to be, being a Netflix film, being full of de-aging technology and stuff, and having the runtime that it does, which is a little over 3 hours, I think. And man, I was just kind of floored by this movie in a way that I didn't expect to be. The beginning of the episode, Mike, you asked like, what was the most disappointing film? I think this one might have been the most surprising for me. Just because I don't know, I didn't expect to connect with this movie as much as I did, or to see, De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Pacino running around in the age that they are now and make it like as captivating of a film as they did. Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people talking about how great this movie looks. I'm not totally in that camp. It looks fine. It looks just perfectly okay to me. But the script and the story and the characters and like the themes of this movie like really connected with me. And, I saw this in Austin, which is 2.5 hours away from where I live in Houston, and drove home after seeing it. Right. And it's just like the whole way home, and that night, like I just couldn't stop thinking about it, and just like played certain scenes and like conversations over and over in my mind. And, this one of those ones I walked out of the theater and was like, I loved that movie. So
cool. So we might talk about this here again in a minute.
Sure. I figured as much.
Yeah.
All right. So on to number 3. So we're getting close.
Okay. So my number 3, this is a film that I might get to talk about now. I don't know. We'll see. This is a film from Noah Baumbach called Marriage Story.
Yeah, you don't get to talk about it now, but a little bit if you'd like.
Sure. Let me just go ahead and say that this is my favorite Noah Baumbach film. He's always been a filmmaker that I've admired from a distance, but have never been able to access emotionally. His films always seem sort of distant from me, if that makes sense. This movie, I do not feel that at all. I think Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver carry this movie. I think it's wonderful. I think the performances are so good. Everything you've been hearing about them is true. And I'll keep it there for now. And we'll shelve it and talk a little bit more about Marriage Story here in a minute. So with that, Chris, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is also Marriage Story. And I'll just say that I think Scarlett Johansson gives the best performance of the year in this movie, and we will talk about it later. Justin, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is also one we're going to have to talk about later, but it's not Marriage Story, not yet. My number 3 is the little foreign film that could, I guess I want to call it this year, because it's blowing up and potentially going to take a lot of awards, but that's Bong Joon-ho's Parasite. Later, yeah, okay. I guess I'll just mostly save my thoughts. I mean, it's just a super fun, thrilling, suspenseful movie that's kind of a little bit of everything, and I love it for that. And yeah, we'll talk about it more later. So on to number 2s, Mike.
Okay, so my number 2 is the film that Justin just got done talking about, and that is Martin Scorsese's The Irishman.
Yes.
So my number 2 is Justin's number, was it 4?
4. Number 4.
Okay. So yeah, The Irishman, everything he says, I will go ahead and just back up. I went and saw this in Dallas. I had to travel 2 hours to see it in theaters. Like a week and a half before it came out on Netflix, but it was worth it. Where I will disagree with Justin is I will say I think this movie looks wonderful. I think
it looks fine.
It looks great. There's nothing wrong with
there's nothing wrong with it. That's why it's fine.
Well, what I'm saying, okay, what's let me put it this way. I think it looks better than a movie you've already said looks good, and that's Joker and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I think this movie is filmed better than both of those, which is not a knock against either of those. But so we're just going to have to agree to disagree, man.
Okay. It's not a knock against the movie. There's nothing wrong. Like, The Farewell looks fine.
I'm just saying I think it looks better than fine.
Okay. Go on.
But so the main thing here, I guess, is the complaints for this movie annoy me similarly how I get annoyed with the complaints for 1917, which is that it's a movie that's very heavily around this one bit of technology. And the technology is not perfect yet. The de-aging is not perfect, just like in 1917. The long, singular, one-shot take is not perfect. You can see the seams in these things. That said, just because someone can see the seams does not make these things not impressive.
Agreed.
Sure.
What's your next criticism? You know what I mean? That's how I feel about The Irishman. yeah, we all know Robert De Niro is very old, and so is Joe Pesci when making this movie, and so is Al Pacino. Yeah, we know what Robert De Niro looked like when he was 30. Does The Irishman look perfect? No, it doesn't. The de-aging technology does not look perfect. You can tell. All of that said, this is the first time in any movie with de-aging technology that's featured so prominently where 30 minutes into the movie, I was able to not think about it.
Yeah.
Except for maybe a couple of scenes where you see some old person movement coming through the camera. I honestly think that the de-aging technology, while not perfect, is passable enough to where if you didn't know it, if you weren't infinitely familiar with what Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro looked like, you wouldn't be thinking about that.
Yeah. The de-aging technology to me is like, you know, like old Wizard of Oz movies or old movies that have the matte paintings. You know, like it's
Right.
like going into that movie like that and being like, I couldn't get past the matte painting. You know, like I
Yeah.
knew that wasn't real. And I guess I can understand that if that's how you're watching a movie, fine. But like, I think if you can't get past the de-aging, you're missing out on a lot of other great stuff.
What I would say is like the de-aging, to me, unless you're citing very specific scenes, the de-aging criticism against that is not like a criticism against the movie that I think holds any water.
Yeah. I think that's fair and well noted.
On top of all of that, I will say that I think this is Scorsese's best movie since Goodfellas.
That's probably true. Well, not personally, but I know. I get it.
Well, you know, then I don't know. He's made a lot of good movies. What do you think's his best movie since Goodfellas?
I have a really big soft spot for Hugo.
Oh, yeah,
The movie
Hugo's
just
really good. But
Works for me and really moves me on a very personal level. It's
Fair
weird
enough.
to compare the two, though. So
well,
I don't know.
I was moved by Hugo as well. I think I have that on 5 stars on Letterboxd.
Yeah. Same.
But yeah, Scorsese, man, he makes a lot of exceptional movies, and I think this is top tier Scorsese, which top tier Scorsese is better than what most people could ever hope to achieve. So
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So yeah, that is my number 2, The Irishman. Happy Criterion's going to be releasing it soon, along with my number 3.
Yeah, totally.
All right, Chris, what's your number 2?
My number 2, I think we're going to have to talk about here in a little bit, but it is also a film that I had very little contact with until I watched this film. But, you know, there's a book, there's 2 other movies, and it's Little Women. Greta Gerwig, we're going to talk about it later.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to say that Greta Gerwig is pretty amazing, and the direction in this is really great, and I can't wait to talk about it further in depth. Justin.
By somebody.
Yeah. What's your number 2?
All right, my number 2 is a film that you guys have both mentioned already, so we can finally talk this thing out, and that is Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story.
I've changed my mind. I don't like that movie anymore.
It's off the list.
Yeah.
Is the cinematography fine?
That is a perfect example of fine cinematography.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Yeah, I totally agree. We are in agreement on this one. But yeah, I
Agree
think,
to agree.
yeah, this is the first Noah Baumbach film that I have truly loved.
Hey, that's what I said.
And yeah, and I really just want to steal everything that you said.
That's why you always put things one higher than me.
I know.
Or 2 higher than me.
That's why I put it down low so I could like hear what you guys said and then just repeat it. But yeah, his other movies, I think there's some really, really good ones. But something about this one just like really, really connected with me. I thought its use of humor was a little bit more accessible than some of his other ones, which are a little bit drier. And I don't know, this one just really made me like laugh out loud at times. And I think it was a little enhanced because I did get to see this one not in a real theater, but at the Museum of Fine Arts here in Houston. I was doing a film festival and they have a little screening room that probably seats about 100 people. And I saw it in there with a crowd, with an audience that were all excited to see it. And so like the humor very much came across. I watched it again on Netflix with my fiance, just the 2 of us, and the humor wasn't quite as palpable. And but other than that, the movie is moving. Chris, you said it. Scarlett Johansson gave the best performance of the year. I think her only competition is Adam Driver.
Yeah.
In this movie. And yeah, it's just
and for my money, he is the better actor of the year.
Yeah,
It's close.
It's close.
It is close.
It's close.
It's splitting hairs. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I love all the side characters. I love Ray Liotta's character even, and of course Laura Dern, and especially Alan Alda's character. And they're just really wonderful.
I love the actress that plays her sister.
Yes.
Oh,
me
yeah.
too.
She was in this show called Nurse Jackie that my girlfriend was watching for a while. And I never watched that show, but I always liked that actress. And I think she's funny in Marriage Story.
Yeah, it makes sense. But, there's a lot to love and a lot to just like really enjoy in such a depressing movie at the same time. Because
But
it
it's
is
not
about
the kind
a
of
divorce.
depressing that makes you, like, at least not with me. It's not the kind of depressing that, it's not Blue Valentine depressing.
No.
Yeah.
Like, there's a little bit of silver lining at the end, or a little bit of hope and maturity, in my opinion, in Marriage Story that kind of highlights the movie and underscores the movie and kind of gives it this sense of maturity and realism that an all-out tragedy would not have had, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think even within Noah Baumbach's like repertoire, like his other films, you watch something like Squid and the Whale, and that movie is like angry, like and like biting, and there are those moments in this film, but ultimately I think that there's like a silver lining or a little bit of hope, and the characters are treated with love that make it not just like this really depressing, or make it really human, I guess is what I would say. Once they're through on the other side, there's like a glimmer of hope for both of them,
Yeah.
and it really makes it more enjoyable. So, yeah.
You're not being drugged through a divorce that's just like you're having to trudge through and like bear, right? Like you're kind of walking alongside them and understanding
And you
what
still
they're
like
feeling.
both of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you don't hate either of them.
No.
At least I didn't.
No,
No,
I've
see
heard,
reasons for both of them.
yeah, I've heard a lot of people really angry with Scarlett Johansson's character.
I mean,
and the
I
choices
was
that
too
she
when
makes.
watching it, but I think that's very. I was also aware that was like the desired effect. We're supposed to take sides, but we're also supposed to like look at this realistically and be like, well, I don't know. I think that's what's so brilliant about the marriage. That there's so many opinions and there's so many like heated opinions about it.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say about it, I think, is I appreciate a movie that like gives me a scene or like a speech that I can't quite forget. And there's one in this movie that Laura Dern gives about fatherhood and how Christianity gives us the example of fatherhood that we get from Christianity. And I'd never really thought about it before, and it just seemed really like insightful and
even that's
something I can't shake.
More specifically, modern Christianity, the modern interpretation of Christianity, not even necessarily the text in the Bible.
Right.
She just talks about like how society in general within the past couple hundred years has really started to nail down like the modern father.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really good. It's it's just something that I can't stop thinking about. And so when a movie does that, I got to call it out.
For sure.
Yeah. That's why it's my number 3.
Yes.
So good.
All right. And that, for reference, was my number 2. And so now we are on to all of our number 1 top films of 2019. So
All
Mike,
right.
you're up first.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a film that has already been referenced by Chris, and that is Parasite for my number 1.
Wait,
It
I
was
didn't.
referenced by me.
Oh, was it by you?
By me, Justin.
Oh, oops. I get you too confused sometimes.
Me too.
And I'm just going to. We'll just have it. But this is also my number 1.
Ah, you had to steal it, didn't you? Steal my spotlight. There's not much to say that hasn't been said. I have been a fan of Bong Joon-ho since I was working at Blockbuster and The Host came out. And I took a chance on The Host because it looked funny. And it was. And I loved it. And ever since then, I have kept track of pretty much all of the movies he has put out. I went back and watched his first movie, Barking Dogs Never Bite, Mother, Memories of Murder, my personal favorite of his, besides maybe Parasite. I actually did not watch Okja. That's the only one I haven't seen.
I watched 2/3 of Okja and then I fell asleep and I never wanted to get back to it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I will say, like, I guess Snowpiercer and Okja are kind of like not my favorite of his. So
Yeah, Snowpiercer is my least favorite. Okja seemed like it was going to be my least favorite, so I never I never watched it. But you know what? I will someday because I really like Bong Joon-ho. I think he is basically a genius. Parasite, like almost like taking my opinion out of the equation, which doesn't make any sense because this is all just opinion. I think Parasite is like just on paper the best movie of the year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just like performances, what it's saying, how it speaks to almost any culture. Just everything about it is universal. It's all visually told. The set design, the blocking, the colors, the chemistry between everybody, all of these things are working congruently to just make something really strong. A lot of movies over the past couple of years have been talking about the difference between class and the upper class and lower class, you know, and a lot of them make very surface level points without saying a whole lot. And I think this movie is the movie that all of these movies like Widows and, you know, all these movies over the past couple of years that have been trying to comment on this stuff, Parasite is the movie they wish they were.
It's making these points without being preachy, which is even better, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I can't gush enough about Parasite. It overtook Memories of Murder as my favorite Bong Joon-ho movie, which I didn't think was possible. Song Kang-ho continues to be one of my favorite actors. So yeah, Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, agree with everything you're saying. There are some shots in this film that will haunt me. Shots that like take place on the stairs. You know, there's always like this theme of stairs, and we're watching people going up and down the stairs or walking down hills, and it's an amazing looking film. The house that they built for it is just works so well. In a year of Eat the Rich movies, this does it the best because it doesn't take sides. You know, like it simply presents, you know, these people to you and doesn't take a side, right? Mm-hmm. Which I find pleasant, and you know, like it's not bashing you over the head with anything.
Yeah, I think you said it better than I did, which basically what I was trying to say, which is just that like it does this better than any of these movies the past couple of years have been trying to do, right?
Yeah.
It does it with grace and intelligence, this social commentary.
Right. One of the things that I find really fascinating is about just how well it translates, you know, like how universal the message is. You know, like this is a Korean film was just a gigantic hit there, came over here, and, you know, like it's also a hit here, and everybody can identify with the characters that are, you know, in it. You can find yourself in this film, you know, like it doesn't matter what layer of class you are, you can find yourself in here. There's like certain movies that fire on all cylinders. You know, this movie looks great. It's got great acting and it's got a great story. So it's like it meets the triangle quota of like all the, you know, it's a 4-quadrant movie or a 3-quadrant movie because it hits all those points really well.
Everything is working together to make any one aspect better.
Yeah. Great way of putting that. So those are my thoughts. And we kind of cut Justin off earlier. Do you have any more thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, before Justin steps in, I think I'm just kidding.
You had me going.
I think we're going to talk about this later.
Wow. Yeah. This is my number 0 film, too. No, so what you guys have said has been basically pretty much all there is to say about the movie, and you've hit it pretty well. I kind of reemphasize the set design. The cinematography is fantastic. The one other thing that I'll say quickly is that this is similar to Waves for me in terms of experience, where there's like a first half of the movie and a second half. Mm-hmm. In a way when like things keep changing, where like the movie gets different, and it's almost like the genre of the movie keeps changing. Yeah. And the difference being
you're like,
that
this is the Ocean's 11 section.
Yeah. And like and the difference being that I was loving this movie from the start. It didn't take the second half to make me love the first half. I was loving it all the way through from start to finish. It's entertaining, it's fun, it's got funny moments in it, it's got shocking moments in it, some very sad moments in it, and it's just almost like a perfect movie, really.
Yeah,
if not like a perfect movie. I don't have any flaws about it at all.
Like, you know, sometimes when there's a twist that happens in a movie, you're like, okay, here we go. You know, like, sure, let's see where we go now. But like with this movie, it just feels like everything just keeps unfolding naturally. And every new twist that happens where you're like, wow, this movie, like 10 minutes ago, I would not have guessed that that's where this movie was going.
Yeah, for sure.
But like it never goes too far. Like every step of the way, you're just like, yep, okay, what next? You know, like,
yeah.
And so it just takes you on this ride and doesn't let go. And, you know, not many movies can do that. At least this skillfully. Yeah.
And so, like, I think Mission Impossible, you know, like, especially the later ones kind of do that. But this movie does the same thing and has something to say. Don't get me wrong, I love the Mission Impossible movies.
Bong Joon-ho is able to do that without hanging Tom Cruise off of a helicopter.
Yeah, and he says something too. You know, like he's saying something really important, and I find that fascinating that he can do that.
Yeah. And Mission Impossible is like all spy action genre.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
too.
Yeah.
So,
You know, speaking of, when I sat down to watch Parasite, I had no idea what genre I was even in for.
me
I was
neither.
like,
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a horror film.
I did too. Like, based on the cover, right? Like, the cover is like one person's like laying down and they all have like the little black bars over their eyes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, is this like a horror movie or like a science fiction movie of like a virus or something?
Yeah, they're in front of that like modern house that, you know, could be futuristic,
Yeah, it could be
could
anything.
be creepy, I don't know.
Isolated.
Yeah. I'm with you. I had no idea what this movie is about. It was my most anticipated movie of the year way back last January when we did this episode, and it did not disappoint, but I was also very excited about it. So it lived up to a lot of expectation.
Yeah. I wish this had been my most anticipated so I could be vindicated right now.
Yeah, you could humble brag like me.
Mm-hmm. Like you just did.
That's right.
Justin, what's your number one?
Well, my number one, if you've been keeping up, you know what it is.
I already do know what it is.
Yeah. It is Little Women
Yay!
from
I was
Greta
going to say Jay
Gerwig.
and Silent Bob reboot.
Yeah. I was trying to think of like a bad film that would be funny to say, but there's just no
Should've
bad
said-
films this year. That's what we've agreed, right?
Should've said
2019 is
yesterday.
amazing. Oh, yeah, that would have been good. A good callback joke. But anyways, Little Women, I think I'm in a similar place that you guys were, and I don't remember who said what exactly, but I knew nothing about the story. I've never read the book. I've never seen any other version of this film. Yeah, I didn't expect to like this film as much as I did because
Same.
I don't know if I'm on record in this podcast, but I'm sure in all of our years of friendship, I have been on record saying that like period pieces tend to not speak to me, and I tend to have like trouble getting into them. There's like a barrier.
Yeah. You've mentioned that to me multiple times, to my
Yeah.
frustration.
Yeah, sometimes they can feel stuffy.
Yeah. And I don't know. I just the legacy of what I know of this book and like the type of book that is, and seeing like images from the other versions and like DVD covers and stuff. I don't know. I wasn't sure I was going to like it, but I went for Greta Gerwig because I absolutely loved Lady Bird, and this film surpassed Lady Bird for me. Like, I think this film is significantly better, and it's got so many emotions attached to it that I have trouble getting through them. But like I laughed a lot during this movie. I just smiled from like pure joy, which is one of my favorite feelings. If I get that in any movie, it just shoots that my opinion of that movie up, even if the rest of it's terrible. If there's like some moment that makes me feel like super happy, and I catch myself just smiling and not realizing it, that speaks to me a lot. I cried at times because of like there's some dramatic, like heartbreaking stuff that happens in this movie. At times because I was so happy at the things that were happening. At times I cried at one point because this movie was just working on all levels for me, and I hadn't felt that in a while in a theater. Like a movie making me feel such joy and like just marveling in the filmmaking. Like I just cried. I don't even remember what part of the movie it was because like I was just into it. And
Oh man,
Yeah.
Sidebar. I remember at one point during the movie, it was like a part where like I think is just like a normal part where everyone else is just watching. I remember like wiping a tear and like looking around and being like, just me? What's going on? Like it was the scene, and I guess spoilers for a non-important scene of Little Women real quick. And this book is so old that I doubt this is even a spoiler for most people. But the scene whenever their mom requests that they give up their breakfast to like the poor family,
oh yeah.
and they do, and they all go there to like share Christmas breakfast with like this like really poor woman and her kids.
Yeah.
I was just a mess in that scene. I don't know why.
And it adds on with I mean, this is a spoiler too, but yeah, they come back and then the rich family across the way has like saw what they did and then gave them even more food than they had in the first place.
Yep.
And it's just so happy.
Wait, is it Chris Cooper who's in this?
Chris Cooper is
Yeah.
That's
Chris Cooper is so good.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's one thing that a point that I wanted to make about this film is that all of the characters are so good, and like there's so much love for them in the filmmaking and in the script and in the performances. And, you know, Greta Gerwig has so much love for them. Then like even a small part like Chris Cooper makes me cry in that movie more than anybody else.
Yeah.
Because what he brings in such a small amount of time. Like I love that character so much.
Yeah. His affection for Beth.
Yeah. Like I saw this movie twice, and I guess there were a couple of scenes that probably, you know, made me cry both times, but like I lost it both times, the most, and the scene where he gifts the piano to Beth and she comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Like that scene just moved me so much. And like, you know, all the performances are great. I love the way this movie looks. It's very simple and very natural feeling. And I'm kind of blown away by how natural it feels sometimes. Even though I'll probably fall a little bit closer to the cinematography is fine. It's not super exceptional, other than it just looking really good for what it's doing, you know. But yeah, I kind of shut you guys off, and I'll shut up for now and let you guys go, because I could just gush all day about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with everything you said. This was my number 6, so I like it 5 less than you, I guess. But I was skeptical about this movie going into it because I'm not familiar with Little Women. I had preconceived notions about the story, just, you know, hearing about it my whole life and hearing about the book and everything. This movie won me over very, very quickly. I think all the performances across the board are exceptional, except for one performance I think is just okay, and that's Timothée Chalamet. I don't think he was necessarily right for this role. Like, he doesn't get the old dialogue down very well, in my opinion. He seems like a teenager that time traveled and wound up in like a period piece.
Him and Bob Odenkirk.
Yeah, Bob. I was about to say, and Bob Odenkirk, whom I love in Better Call Saul, I think is not good in this movie. But
it's not that he's not good. I think it's
just
for
weird.
me.
It's a weird part.
It's weird to see him.
He's like, my Little Women. But like, I don't
He's not in the movie enough to like divorce him from being Bob Odenkirk.
Maybe that's what it is. But beyond those two men, I think the movie is perfect.
Yeah. I even like Timothée Chalamet, and I like Bob Odenkirk, but there is no denying.
I don't dislike Bob Odenkirk or Timothée Chalamet, but I do very much get the impression that Timothée Chalamet like can't period act.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily get that either. I think his chemistry with Saoirse Ronan really shows up on screen.
I think he had better chemistry with Florence Pugh.
There was that as well.
I know.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned her, because I thought her performance was astounding, because she has to play several different age ranges.
Yeah.
And
she's the best part of the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. There's like this one moment where she's like kind of throwing a fit, and it was just like so funny and so like heartwarming at the same time, because she's just like, I want to go ice skating, or whatever it was that she was trying to do. And
she wants to go to the party.
So great. Huh?
She wants to go to the party with them.
Oh,
she does go ice skating because things happen.
Yeah, and then they have to save her. But the other thing that I guess what I should say, not having seen or read any of the other versions, I can't necessarily speak to it very well. But what I will say, I think that she made a really great decision in the way that she set up making this film, you know, like kind of starting off in the middle. And I think one of the things that does that, it makes it about different things, like about women and money and stuff like that, right? And I think that makes the movie feel more modern. I mean, just like, what was the other movie we were talking about that felt more modern? It felt more modern, and like it was talking about today's things, you know, as opposed to feeling stuffy and old. Like Parasite. Parasite crosses cultures, and this may take place in olden times, but it feels very modern and refreshing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's pretty much it for me. I don't have anything else to say. Like, just when a movie, when I'm as happy as I am watching this movie, like, it's got to be my number one, because like that's my favorite thing to feel in a movie, is like happy and laughter and stuff. Like, I enjoy a good, you know, drama that's dark and like kind of twisted and give me some big philosophical message. Not to say that Little Women doesn't have some stuff to say, because it certainly does. But, you know, it's almost like it kind of borders on just like an escapism joy for me. And I can't deny like that feeling, you know?
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So that concludes our top 10 for 2019. Before we get into honorable mentions and audience favorites, do you guys want to recap our top 10s real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So starting with me, I will say my number 10 was Pain and Glory. Number 9, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Number 8, 1917. Number 7, Us. Number 6, Little Women. Number 5, The Lighthouse. Number 4, Uncut Gems. Number 3, Marriage Story. Number 2, The Irishman. And number 1, Parasite.
All right. And for me, my number 10 was A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. My number 9 was 1917. My number 8 was The Art of Self-Defense. And number 7 was Knives Out. Number 6 was Uncut Gems. Number 5 was Waves. Number 4 was The Farewell. Number 3, Marriage Story. 2, Little Women. And number 1 was Parasite. I gotta say, good choice, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. Good job, Chris.
All right, so recapping mine, number 10, The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Number 9, Under the Silver Lake. 8 was Joker. Number 7, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Number 6, The Farewell. Number 5, Waves. Number 4, The Irishman. Number 3, Parasite. 2 was Marriage Story. And number 1, Little Women.
Where did you put Marriage Story, Mike? Was it number 3?
Yes.
Yeah.
So our top 3 were all the same, just in different... Oh, no, not Little Women.
Yeah, my Little Women was number 6 for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the outlier. But that's cool. I'm happy it's anywhere in your list.
Yeah. Let's talk about honorable mentions real quick.
Okay.
So I mentioned earlier, I have like a top 20. So the next 10, I honestly feel like could have been a top 10 in any other year. So
Yeah.
I've got Knives Out for number 11, Waves for 12, The Souvenir for number 13, which is actually a
nice.
really cool drama starring Tilda Swinton's daughter.
The sequel's coming out soon, too.
Yeah, I'm excited. Honeyland, number 14. Number 15 is The Farewell, which made you guys' top 10. Number 16, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Number 17, Ash is the Purest White. Number 18, American Factory. 19 and 20, Art of Self-Defense, and Last Black Man in San Francisco. So a lot of movies you guys had in your top 10, I had in my honorable mentions, and just couldn't find a way to squeeze them in on such a strong year.
Yeah, like, I mean, I could go like list like through my top 25 and get to films that I really like a lot. But I'll do something similar to you. I'll go through my other 10, which it does include a lot that were on you guys' list. My number 1 that just missed out on that we haven't talked about at all, that would be number 11. It almost made it, but that was A Hidden Life from Terrence Malick.
Yeah, that was the only movie that I really just like was killing myself trying to see, and I just could not find it anywhere.
Yeah. It's difficult. But moving on, so then I've got Us, Uncut Gems, Pain and Glory, 1917, Knives Out, The Lighthouse, where we differ a little bit in my top 20. I also have Shazam, which is a film I really like.
Man, I can't not think of the 90s Shaquille O'Neal Genie movie every time I hear the name of that movie.
I know. Well, it's a different movie. Also, I like Jojo Rabbit. And
JoJo's great.
That's in there. And then this will probably be controversial, but Brittany Runs a Marathon I really connected with and really enjoyed. So
I say I'm the one who liked it the least, so I think that's what you mean by controversial. I would say that that movie's fine. I would not say it's bad. So
it's
not
like the
controversial
cinematography in The Irishman.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole movie is like Justin's opinion of the cinematography. Cool. No, I would say that Brittany Runs a Marathon is a feel-good, easy breezy, lighthearted watch.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit more substance in that. But yeah, it's right there. It's a feel-good film for sure.
Yeah. All right, Chris?
Yeah, so just a few of mine. Midsummer, I wanted to find a spot, but I couldn't. Lighthouse is on there. Apollo 11, which is a documentary that I loved, that I saw earlier in the year. The Irishman, I really wanted to find in there. I also have The Souvenir in my runner-ups. Jojo Rabbit, and then a movie I saw early in the year called Diane. Those were all movies that didn't quite make the cut, but on any given day could be like part of the bottom 4 for sure, I think. Bottom 5.
Yeah. Well, great.
Yeah. Cool.
Last thing, we put a question out on Twitter asking for people's favorite movie of 2019. So we can kind of go over those. We're not going to read every one of them out.
Yeah, I think you just go over like maybe the top one or two of each person if they gave more than one.
Sure, yeah. So we'll start with at Cinema Recall. Number 2 for them was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and number 1 was Jojo Rabbit. So I don't think either of those films made any of our top 10s, so they probably hate us now.
Well, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was on my honorable mentions.
Yeah. And Jojo Rabbit was in my honorable mentions.
Yeah. Another year, it probably would have made it on a top 10, but nope. This year was just too strong.
Yeah. I have a running list, and this sounds bad, but it's number 34 on my list. There's a lot of good movies this year.
Yeah. Makes sense. It's number 16 on mine.
Nice. So we have 2 votes for The Parasite from at Real Matt Ward and at Don't Tell the _elf, who's David Wheeler. 2 votes for Parasite.
Nice.
From Ronnie Casole at Ronnie Howlett 3, he votes for The Irishman. We've got a vote from at McNeil _Ian for Booksmart.
Yeah.
Then from at Dr. _Magnifico, number 2 was Parasite and number 1 was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Then, a lot of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood love on this.
There's more coming.
Yeah.
From Sartaj Singh at Sartaj Govind Sin. He has number 2, If Beale Street Could Talk. Oh, this is UK release dates, by the way. That confused me for a second.
Yeah.
But his number 1 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's shortlisted from The January Man at Holiday, but his number 1 is Jojo Rabbit.
Nice.
And the rest don't have a rank. And then last but not least, from Casezilla at Casezilla, they say, I don't know if this is a he or she because I think the picture is Natasha Lyonne.
Yeah, it's from Russian Doll.
Okay. But they say, hark, hark, The Lighthouse was the best movie of 2019.
Yeah. And then also A Lonely Toaster Oven replied as well. And they said Midsummer.
Oh.
And Parasite was their number 2. And Little Women was their number 3. And The Farewell was their number 4. And Us was their number 5. So I think that's probably a pretty strong top 5.
That is a strong top 5. A lot of strong movies. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think I dislike any of these movies.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to bring all the audience questions up is because there are some movies in here that got a lot of love this year that we didn't mention, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And this is coming from me, who is the biggest Quentin Tarantino fan that I know of.
Same.
And I think it didn't even crack close to my top 10. Like, it was 6 away from cracking the top 10. And so that is not a slight against Tarantino, because I like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood better than any movie since Inglourious Bastards of his. But that said, it's just a really strong year. So, yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, that I think does it for this very long episode, but very fun.
Yeah, it was interesting to see you guys' top 10s and kind of, well, I think what's so cool about the top 10s is we each have like a lot of this, like similar movies in the conversation, right? Within the top 20, we're all thinking of the same movies. But it's interesting to see like what each of us responds to more. Like Justin, you were talking about how, like, you know, Little Women made your number 1 because you liked the lighthearted happiness of it all.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so anyway, I just think it's interesting to see like what made it into our top 10s, what didn't, and what that says about us and our tastes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what better way to get to know somebody than listening to their top 10 movies of the year?
There's not a better way. Don't even try to find one.
No. I can decide, give me your top 10 movies of the year, and I'll decide within like 30 seconds if I want to keep talking to you and be a friend or not.
Exactly. Tells you everything you need to know.
Exactly. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And of course, thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Thank you guys for sitting through this. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to give us your top 10 of the year, send them our way. We'd like to read it. Yeah. If there is something on here that we said that does not belong on here, let us know in the most angry message you possibly can. And
we're going to get so many Joker messages now. Thanks.
Yeah. Send them to Justin.
Yeah. Address them to me. Yeah. I will listen.
Stay tuned to this channel. Next week, we'll be putting out an episode on Stagecoach, it would seem.
Yes.
It sure would.
Our first Criterion Western.
Yeah, casual Criterion, Western, Stagecoach, John Ford, John Wayne.
Yeah, I got to say, I mentioned earlier I guested on the Cinemas podcast. Well, the host of that, Mike, he's a very big fan of Westerns, and he was telling me that...
I'm a big fan of Westerns, and my name is Mike, too.
I know, it must be a thing. But he was saying that if Stagecoach didn't win, he demanded that our next Casually Criterion topic that we choose the films from be Westerns, so that we finally review a Western on the show. So he will be very happy to know that this one won.
Well, Mike, if you're listening, buddy, if you wanted more Westerns, that's all you had to say.
You got it.
Yeah. Next year, 2020, don't worry. Coming up,
the
Mike.
year of the Westerns.
Cool. Well, if you want to vote in our Criterion poll, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also send your questions or topics to discuss about the movies we review each week there. You can also send those to casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for spending the last year with us. We really appreciate it, guys. And I look forward to a whole brand new year of new movies that we all get to talk about. And yeah, I'm excited. Talk to you later.
Man, was this episode a year long? Dang.
Oh, wow.
Well,
I need to go shave.
Thanks for listening
Have dinner.
in the last year. Maybe that's why you're so hungry.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.